unbreakable, breakable.
Now there ain't nothing to it. Go ahead and bring Goliath on. Ain't no giant, I ain't gon' fire on. Catch a fade, I'm wrong, I'm gone.
Hey everybody, what's up? Toby here with the Disaster Podcaster. Clark and I are both out of town this week, but we've got some incredible stuff planned for you. We did a podcast with Robert Keefer and the Gorilla Geeks, and we're going to play that for you today. We got into a lot of stuff. They do a lot of discussions around crawl spaces, water damage in crawl spaces, remediation in crawl spaces, and how that can lead into the restoration industry. So hang with us, and we're going to get started. But first, we want to thank our sponsor, Kahi. Kahi, as many of you know that have listened to the podcast for any length of time, is an asset tracking, vehicle, and driver monitoring systems, along with so much more. They've done so much for us, and we really appreciate it. And we just want to give them a shout out. If you got any questions, you can reach out to kahi.io is their website, not a .com. It's kahi.io. We're not doing live call-ins today, but if you would just leave a comment below if you have a question or a comment about something that you hear, and we will have somebody monitoring that, and we can interact with you there. If we don't get back to you right away, we will definitely respond. And without further ado, here's Robert and Clark.
You have a waterproofing and disaster restoration business, and you want to expand and grow your brand. That's where we come in. This is the Coffee and Crawlspace Show. Our passion is to produce premium quality content related to the crawlspace encapsulation, basement waterproofing, and foundation repair industry. Plus, we love coffee, and you love coffee, so grab a cup. And let's talk crawl spaces and more. Now, here's your host, Crawlspace Keefer.
Hey guys, Crawlspace Keefer here, and I have my coffee, and I am ready to talk crawl spaces. And we have a special guest with us today, Mr. Clark Brown with Restoration Advisors. And Clark is the owner of Restoration Advisors, a disaster restoration consulting firm that helps water and fire damage businesses become more profitable and also square away their operational processes. Welcome to the show, Clark.
Thank you very much, man. I'm so excited to be here. Have my coffee as well.
Oh, nice. I got to get you one of our mugs at some point. But so Clark, can you tell our audience a little bit about your background before you got into the disaster restoration business?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. So did you have another question?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So my background, this is my second career, although it's a funny way that they're connected. So I have been a champion of small to medium-sized businesses for my whole life. I have worked for some very large companies after I owned my own in this space, but I just found that I connect better with small and medium-sized companies. It's kind of like pro athletes. When they're in college and little league, they still have a lot more passion and they still want it pretty damn bad. They get really big. People forget where they came from, forget why they do it, and it becomes spreadsheets and dollars. So I got into this business as my second career, the disaster recovery, remediation, IEQ business. My first career, my life, my parents owned dry cleaners and laundry, retail, where you would just take your nice shirts and your pants and your sweaters and get them cleaned. That morphed over somewhere around the late 90s to serving the mold days. I'm originally from Texas, so I was living in Texas, and this explosion of mold remediation kind of started. I think they call it mold is gold days.
Mold is gold.
Mold is gold. The Ballard case kind of set the whole thing up from the farmers lawsuit. But we were having all these clothes and soft goods and textiles pouring into our retail establishment and just suffocating our business workflow just from the volume. And so I started a separate company or a separate facility to handle all that, saw the volume, the profit, the, those kind of things. And I just really kind of liked what these guys did. And it was something different, something that I had not done my whole life. So I built that up, sold that business, and went to work for a national, very large restoration company. Most of my career, Robert, which is right at this year, will be 21 years in this segment of the industry, most of it has been involved in commercial and primarily larger losses. Although I have done plenty of the smaller, but I owned my own restoration company for a while, which did residential and commercial. And then now, of course, I've started Restoration Advisors after a couple of years.
Yeah, awesome. So, how did you enter the actual industry? Like, what was the connection? Who did you know, or who brought you into it?
So I sold my dry cleaners textile company to a gentleman that just wanted a plug and play business that was already generating revenue. So I'm sitting on this great exit plan, a lot of capital. Thought about, okay, what am I going to do next? Maybe it's time to grow up and do something else. And I jobbled around a lot of different things, Robert. I wanted to be a guide, a hunting and fishing guide. But I'm like, I don't think that's enough for me. I think it would be fun, but it would get old, and it's kind of seasonal. So I didn't advertise that I was looking for something to do, but an owner of, and I'll just say Pete Bell, the owner of Cotton Catastrophe, a big national disaster restoration company. They had been clients, and a lot of people had been clients of mine, and they'd said, hey, hey, Clark, I see that you sold your business, and we're growing, looking for talented superstars. And I don't think you are a superstar. He didn't say that. He said, I'm looking for stars that have adaptation skills. And I think you've got that. Would you like to work for us? I was like, okay, here, I'm going to go work for someone else. But what better way to learn a new industry than to team up with people that are passionate about it? So I did that, and I went through many, many years with him, went through the 2000s and that company, and they went on and on. I left there for a bigger opportunity, but with his, with my mentors, salute, he's a great, you gave me 9-10 good years, and went on to work for another company that was already growing and just was going to give me more exposure, more international work. And I just looked at that as a resume builder for a long time. I was building my skills, my acumen, playing for some minor league teams and major league teams to one day buy my own team.
So you've done all these big commercial things. You've worked for big commercial companies. You're working with smaller companies. What makes you stay in the disaster restoration industry? What makes you passionate about?
Well, passion is an interesting word, and you have to have it. I just see a big need. I have probably, while I'm very much, Robert, a black and white kind of assertive, blunt person, I also have empathy but a certain type of empathy. I have empathy for those that are grateful and that show up. And I just saw a really, really big need right around the middle of the 2015, 2016 season. I came into, we're going to talk about it later, I'm sure. We came into an interaction with a lot of small to medium-sized restoration contractors around this country who put a lot of effort into growing their business, but becoming technically incredible. They recognized how important proper remediation was, and so their why was aligned, but they weren't great at business. And anybody knows that if you can do the best work ever, but if you don't know how to run a business and deal with the things that happen there, you won't be around to serve your community with that great service you do. So that really drives me a passion. I still continue to find these enlightened people who want to pair up both sides of that and grow something great for their employees and for their community. So that's my passion, is as long as I still find that garden of people that are saying, hey, we're good at what we're good at, but we not at what we're not, then I try to fill that void if I can, and just educate.
Yep. Now, let's jump into air. So you also started an organization. So tell us a little bit about that for anybody who doesn't particularly know what that
Yes.
is.
So the Alliance of Independent Restorers is a gradual culmination of a movement that we started back many years ago, kind of on the online forums, if you will, just as a great place to have community. And we just continued to see that it needed to be more than just Facebook groups. We need to be more than just people chatting and complaining and it really never going anywhere. So I started the Alliance of Independent Restorers with my partner, John Grubb, who is another very passionate background in restoration remediation. And he saw things the same way. Let's build something that's more like a collaborative or a coalition of the right people trying to do the right thing that want to grow their business without giving up, without joining, programs, TPAs, or a franchise. Why do you have to give up a big portion of your business, your profit, your fuel, your lifeline to become greater when mentoring is such a big thing? I think our industry, I think our world doesn't put enough emphasis on mentoring as it used to. A lot of people have become selfish dealing with it today, but we have a coalition of about 300 contractors of all shapes and sizes, franchises, non-franchises. So the independent does not mean you can't drive a truck with the logo on it of a national brand. It just means that we're independent. We're not going to be, insurance, bound and locked in. And they all have conversations together, and everyone discovers strengths and weaknesses from others, and a lot of other cool things. We have chapters. We have perks. We have affiliates that come in and give really great, valuable propositions because of their association to get them some discounts on things that they need for growing their business. So it's really, really been great. Really been fun.
How many chapters do you guys have now?
We have 8 chapters, and we're going through a series of pretty much our first big gathering since COVID. COVID was a real association killer for a lot of groups and people. Everyone's zoomed out. Everyone is kind of, you don't get the same thing as being in a room with people, with some coffee, and just not distracted by anything, and just in that meeting. So we're going through those, but we're finding out, because of the country of where the members are, some of those zones, some of those regions and chapters are so far apart that the times and the occurrences, how much we want to get together is going to be inhibited by the distance. So we're probably going to work on a plan to chasm down into more regions where it's a lot easier for people to get around. But we've just got these pockets where there's only one person. And I don't know about you, but a gathering of one person is called a picnic. It's not really a gathering. So we just had one here in Richmond, Virginia for the Mid-Atlantic states. We had 17 people come. Most were members, but everyone brought, not everyone, most of them brought a guest, a person in their market that they said, I feel like you would be aligned with me. Our ethos is the same as yours, and I really want you to see and meet these people that we're hanging out with. And they showed up, and they're like, where was this 3 years ago, 5 years ago? So we have those still coming up for our other regions in the next few weeks. And as some of them are up north, so they're waiting on some like weather not to be 14 below in Wisconsin and stuff like that.
Awesome. So Restoration Advisor, your main business. Tell us about that. Like, why did you start that? What are the plans for it? Who's your ideal client?
Yep. Started that just because I've always seemed to, whether I knew it or not, I was always the person that people were approaching me for advice, for, hey, an idea, bounce things off of. And I suppose I'm very people oriented in that way. And I literally want to see people succeed. When I was a business owner, when I was a project director of a large company, I just said, we're only as strong as the weakest link. I've always believed in that. I learned that from my grandfather. So that's, people ask me all the time, Clark, didn't you make more being a contractor than you do now? Absolutely. I really did. But I think I'll be 49 this year, Robert. And I know you're still in your 20s.
I wish.
But at some point you learn in life that money just isn't everything, and freedom and passion, and there always can be more money. So I became a coach and a restoration business consultant. But I just like the word coach more. I played baseball in college, and I needed my coaches to sharpen skills that I didn't have. And they wanted to see me win, but they didn't do it for me. They showed me how to do it. And then we also are now evolved into, so we have one-on-one coaching, group coaching. We have some masterminds that we do. That's not a real big part of things, but Zoom, obviously, the last couple of years has enforced that there's a place for that. But again, I don't get as much as I get in person. And then we do some online courses now. So that's obviously the way that people are consuming content. Some really good, well-produced, drilled in courses about specific things that people are, micro and macro issues. So those are some things that we do. And then alternatively, I teach around the country. I've got a tour that I'm coming up on starting the 28th, a couple of cities. It's nothing much to really affect. My family life is my most important thing. I have a wife and 6 kids and still trying to run this business and air. So I try to really not go overboard with everything, but I love to teach live. Live is, we're doing this podcast live. I love live. I love, unfortunately, talking, but I like to listen to people and get feedback, and people walk away with a win and just saying, tell me 2 years ago, remember that thing you told me? Dude, I nailed it, and it's going great. That's all I need. That's all. It's all great for me.
Awesome. Yeah. And if anybody doesn't know, it is Disaster Podcaster. If anybody wants to look up Clark's podcast show. Mm-hmm. So let's go. Oh, go ahead.
Can I talk about that? So
sure.
That's something that's relatively new, although we just started our second season. Podcasting, I mean, I never thought I would do a podcast, and I really didn't know so many people consume podcasts. But our podcast in its current iteration is different than any other thing in our industry. And I just, because there were a lot of podcasts coming up, and I'm always trying to be different and what's next. So we now have what I think is the industry's only live streaming, take phone calls from people podcast. So we're every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. We have a topic. People call in live. Sometimes I have guest hosts. Sometimes I don't. People can call in and ask questions of the host or me, and it's streaming. And then, of course, it's turned into a podcast later. And that has really, really taken off because it's really, people love interaction. People love that dynamic, but it's just a lot to produce. It's a lot to do. But, with software like Robert, like you're so good with, you can figure it out. But we're having fun with it, and I'll continue to do it as long as it's fun. So yeah, check out Disaster Podcaster, and comments are great. It tells us what we should talk about next.
Yep. And if you don't already know, your podcast, it helped inspire me to, move forward with this particular one. So yeah, not sure if you really knew that. So
Did not.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about doing it, wanting to do it, and so on and so forth, but you were rocking it, right? And you had gone after the right audience and everything. I certainly wanted to go after my audience, being, the Crawlspace Basement Waterproofing Foundation guys. And, because you did it, gave me the courage to do it too. So here I am, and thank you very much for that.
I'm honored. I didn't know that, but
absolutely. Yeah.
You're a natural for content. I mean, it's just everyone's you are infectious with your delivery, and a lot of people know a lot of things, Robert, and a lot of people know a lot of things, but doesn't mean they can teach and share that. So a lot of people just are stuck in their own head, but you have that knack of taking from here to there. So kudos to you.
I super appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words. So we're going to jump into the meat of this, right? So I want to talk about disaster restoration problems, some of the problems that they face. One being no steady stream of work, right? So it's a very feast or famine type of relationship that they have with their client base. Either a storm's rolling through, or there's not a storm rolling through, or the season's affecting it, right? Would you say that is a major problem that they face?
Major problem.
Right.
Major problem.
And
Some of it self-inflicted, and some is just seasonal or regional. So.
Yep. Now we'd never worked together at the same disaster restoration uh, company, but we've both worked for many over our career. So I'm going to say something to you that I bet you've heard a billion times, right? About this one particular thing. Can you guys call everybody that you know and see if we did anything wrong because the phones aren't ringing? Call the insurance adjusters to make sure our relationships are good. Call the carriers to make sure that we didn't get paused or kicked off, right? Call your realtors. It's call everybody, right? Because it's such feast and famine. They, all the owners just start freaking out the moment that, things go into the famine part.
100%. I mean, you're checking to make sure your website didn't crash. Your VoIP hasn't been shut off. Make sure we paid the bill. Again, and or is there somebody new in town that's giving away free crawl space jobs? Or,
Right.
really, it causes that because I'd say yes, our industry is very much a lot more hunters than farmers, and not intentional about. But that's also, I think there's a lot of factors. There's saturation in markets has become really a big deal, but just not having a really good plan about a business and just thinking everybody's your client and serving everybody. So
That's an interesting analogy, the hunter versus farmer. Can you explain that to our audience a little bit?
it's an old marketing thing. Is a hunter is those that go out and they're looking for a kill that they can eat tonight. And there's certainly a place and time and a tenacity for that. That's what a lot of people that sell real well, that are really that really are transactional are good at that. And I will tell you, pause before I go into the hunter part. Our industry makes people believe that that's what we must be. Everyone thinks that a customer is only a customer once. Everyone thinks that I'm only going to help somebody once, maybe twice in their career, and that relationships aren't nearly as strong as they should be. And then the other side is the hunter, who realizes that every person that puts their retinas on your logo is a potential referral partner. And not just because it's great colors, but because everyone's looking for credibility in referring to people they care and love about products and stuff. Because no one wants to see their friends and neighbors working with bad service company products or anything like that. So a hunter are those that say, I'm going to plant seeds, obviously being very metaphoric here, planting seeds of my marketing, of my relationships, and honestly, reciprocity. I'm going to give to others. I'm going to give to my colleagues. I'm going to give to my BNI group or whatever that is a long time without expecting a call back today, because I know doing the right thing, givers give, I'm going to get it back, and creating a garden to where I can eat even when no one else is eating. I have a horde of harvest. And so that's kind of a mentality that I really, really love, that, we all need to stop thinking about what's going to come from this podcast or this social media ad. What am I going to get a job from that today? Probably not. That's what's called marketing. But someone sees it, and when the time comes that they need to refer you or use you, they're going to remember that you didn't shove it down their throat, and that you were just saying, hey, we're available. This is what we specialize in. Because I like to say that the niches are the riches.
Yep. So another one I want to jump into is being fooled that restoration contractors themselves are being fooled to think the insurance company dictates their prices based on another third party's software. And I know that this one is the one that gets you probably most fired up, right? So this is for all your crawl space, basement waterproofing guys, foundation repairs, they have no concept of this, right? They come up with their own prices just like a normal company. This is what it is, right? And take it or leave it. Maybe they offer discount for certain things. But in the insurance world, unfortunately, that doesn't happen, but it should. Can you elaborate a little bit on that issue?
Yeah. And yes, that's a very, very big, I don't want to drown and bore your audience with a lot of it, but I will start with this. And as Robert, you alluded to, much of my platform and my brand is around educating people what you're talking about. But it can be misconstrued as I'm anti-insurance companies, and I'm not. Insurance companies have a place and a need. Almost everyone I know has benefited from having insurance on something that they have. But they have to also be eyes wide open from a business standpoint to know that insurance companies have built a process and a business around being profitable. And they also, the golden rule, he who has the gold makes the rules. They also hold the money in these sometimes projects where you might be doing an insurance related claim job. And it causes contractors to shift their mind and their mind's eye over to the insurance company and almost look at them as the client, because that's where the money is going to come through, eventually to your customer and to you. But they found, so somewhere along the way, there was that. And then that has morphed into that singular attention of power has led into, well, now we're going to tell you that since you're already serving me as the insurance company, if we'll pay you on time or quicker if you price jobs at X, and you're giving a sizable discounts, which is oftentimes your profit. So that little ecosystem has caused what has become, unfortunately, in our industry, and maybe less. I'd like to say to you and I and a couple of us have really changed that narrative a lot. But in the last couple of years, that was the industry standard, that I charge what the insurance company says, and that's it. And it usually, what I like to say all the time is, if it's not your program, it's their program. If it's not playing by your rules, you're playing by theirs, and it's not aligned. You're fighting over that profit. So that's kind of a nutshell of some of it.
Yeah, so that was good. You already covered one of my other topics, kind of negotiating the invoice after the work's complete, right? Another huge thing that most companies can't even wrap their head around. So restoration contractors, go out, bill something using a third-party program like you talked about, and then still the prices are negotiated way after the work is done. I mean, just crazy.
2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. And I think that, Robert, I tell everyone in the very, very get-go, let words matter. Terminology is important. Let's start being real clear on the words estimate and invoice. People will send a document to a customer and or sometimes the insurance company, and their term will be estimate. Well, that just leads to believe that this is still negotiable.
Yep.
This software that you're referring to, it is an estimating software. It's not an invoicing platform. It's just such a big thing. And then I would add to this, Robert, is a lot of, I'm sorry, I just trying to phrase it right. So again, money is power. When the insurance company holds the money, it really leads a lot to the control. And I just don't want to really, I mean, most contractors are pretty clear on this right away, but what's not clear is the path out of it, because getting the first notice of loss on a fire, water, or sometimes mold, not usually, but it's getting harder and harder because the insurance company has built a very good system. Good for them. I'm proud of them. Have built a good system around owning the narrative and owning the claim. So I see a lot of people dive into that. And then lastly, I don't know how small it is, Robert, but there's a small sector of that. There's a heavy amount of franchising that's happening in our industry. Some of those franchises are built on relationships with the insurance company and their guidelines. And so, you can open a business and almost from day one, you're getting calls, but it's with these service level agreements and things like that. And that causes people to that becomes a way of life. It becomes like, I see this every day. This is what I do. What in the world are you talking about? We can do this thing differently. It just doesn't even seem rational to some people.
Yep. And I'm going to hit a couple more pain points, and then we're going to actually talk about some of the solutions I think that some restoration contractors should seriously look into. Another pain is a large AR, right? So most companies, they'll have some accounts receivable, right? And that's kind of normal in business to have a little here and there, right? But the disaster restoration industry, most of the business owners have a mega accounts receivable, right? I mean, all the businesses you've seen were hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars sometimes. Not it's not absurd to see, you know, 6 months, sometimes a year, few times even longer than that before somebody gets paid, so they've gone out, done all this work, they've priced it, right? They're fighting over the pricing of it, not using their own pricing. And then on top of it, they're waiting 6 months or more, right? At
Yeah,
least 90 days is just very typical, unfortunately.
very typical.
Right. So that leads into another pain point would be like emergency services, right? So whether you're a brand new restoration company and you're out there doing everything and wearing all hats, or you're established and you have technicians out there, it's a constant burnout for either you or for the technicians that you have on call, because they can't have a normal life, right? So that's another big pain point.
It is. And I think it's even more so, Robert, now with just kind of the labor shortage that we're going through. Not the shortage of labor. No one, they're all still here. But just the struggle to find people doing blue collar work. I think that's putting a lot more weight in what the example of you're talking about on those that are still there willing to do it. And I think it's just causing a reciprocal cycle of burning people out. They want to go find something else to do. And then we don't have anything, we don't have anyone to respond to the promise that we made of what we do. So I think that's a growing issue. And there's not a contractor I talk to that's not probably up the highest of their priority chain right now.
Yeah.
Burnout is real.
Yeah. Hopefully my wife doesn't watch this for what I'm about to say, but believe it or not, when I was younger, I did date other people. And I remember a very specific time that I had dated this girl, and I got called for an emergency call out, right? And I had a decision. She's like, you're really going to go on this, like, and never get to see you. And I was like, yeah, this is really my job. I really have to do it. And she says, well, you got to make a choice. Like, either we're going to continue dating or you're going to choose your career. And I did choose my career. I was younger and was very career focused, but I'm sure that there's just so many people that are in that situation with, their spouse. It's like, I can't do this. You're just never home.
Robert, I get that. I mean, I would say, I didn't mention it, but I would say a big portion of why I moved over into the teaching, coaching, mentoring side of things was to get off the road. I was literally, we could be at dinner and I had to keep a bag packed in my truck because I could go right to the airport. And, my wife and she was a single mother at that point with trying to raise kids at home. So I think that happens an awful lot, that pursuit of men are trying to, and women, if you're the money maker in the house and the head of household, you're trying to build towards something that gets financial security. And sometimes we tip the scales a little bit too much and we forget that life still needs to be lived. And then, Robert, I will tell you, certainly don't want to go deep into it. These things that you're talking about, I see a lot of examples where they cause substance abuse, alcoholism, and of course, divorce, estranged parent alienation. It has a lot. And I think leaders of our industry need to look at look at our people as people and look for signs of this stuff and look at our business models. But I don't want to get deep into that. But I'm real passionate about people, leaders. Not what does Simon Sinek say? It's not about who you're in charge, but that you're of your charge. You are responsible for their well-being while they work for you. And I think sometimes that should come a little higher on the scale of hierarchy.
Yep. And I'll just touch upon that last one, which was, the strain of that's put on the marriage, right? That is just unbelievable. And if you have kids, you're never spending time with them and things of that nature. So to go back into the positive side of things, what this episode's really about, right? Which is add-on water damage services for restoration contractors. So how do you solve some of those problems? So, I think personally, I'd like to get your opinion that disaster restoration guys, especially your water mitigation and mold remediation type guys, should really think about diversifying their services and adding things such as crawl space encapsulation, right? Because it's fixing water damage problems. They're often doing the mold remediation in the crawl space, something that they're also very experienced in. Same thing with basement waterproofing. Basement waterproofing is nothing but a different type of water damage that's happening to the structure, right? And often causes mold. So they're right back in the mold. A lot of these restoration companies also are full service, as we refer to it in that industry, right? Which means that they do the repairs, right? All the rebuilding and everything. So they already have a construction team. So turning around and offering foundation repair, like replacing joists and putting in jacks and so on and so forth. These are things that a lot of these, they already have the skills, right? And encapsulating, a lot of people can be like, oh my God, I don't know how to encapsulate. But it's almost just like putting up a vapor barrier or containment, right? When you're putting in your engineering controls in the disaster restoration business, you can think of it a lot like that. And me personally, if you can look at some of these guys who do like amazing containment, right? Those guys will be awesome at doing encapsulations, right? They just got to find those guys. So what do you think about them adding those types of services, right? And I'll elaborate more after your answer on it, how it fixes some of these problems we just talked about.
Yeah, no, I 1,000% agree with you, and I know a lot of very successful companies that I call it diversification, whether it's this or something else, but your customer already needs this work. Not doing it is pushing it into the hands of another contractor altogether. And again, I think this is a way to just strengthen bonds and get rid of some of that other things you were talking about, but technically, when I hear people say, I don't know how to do that. Well, listen, you learned how to do psychometrics and dry. You learned about thermal drying. You can learn anything if you build a plan around it and apply it. And I think Crawlspace, you said it, Robert, it directly impacts what we're already trying to do, which was create a better IEQ, a better, indoor air quality. Crawlspaces affect that. And the minute you learn some things about stack effect, the minute you learned about how that can handle substructures, and honestly, your HVAC may sometimes be in there. So it really is a perfect tie-in. Crawlspace, I've had a company that we did very, very successful Crawlspace. There's a lot of other benefits of doing it beyond just it matches what you need. I'm sure you'll talk about that, but it's like anything else. So Robert, let's make sure you're going to do it right. There's a lot of bad examples of how it's done, but I think adding Crawlspace encapsulation is one thing is a no-brainer. If you're not doing it, someone else is. And again, customer just might not know that. Could you do this? Absolutely, we could do that.
And what's the national average water damage job now? Mitigation only.
It's a pretty big number wide. Again, we talked about some people believe that a software can price your job and it must be that. And some say, I know what cost is. I would say probably safely average between people who know their worth and don't. It's probably 6,200, maybe some people disagree. Maybe we're still below 6, but I think that a lot of people doing the right work are seeing it. And I think $6,200 is $6,200 to $6,500.
Yep.
For a non-reconstruction without contents. And it's just your basic water damage.
Yep. And now a crawl space encapsulation, would be on average 12 to 15,000, right? Mm-hmm. So why should a restoration contractor consider that? Obviously the revenue's great, right? You can be very profitable at it, right? Just like anything else. You're going to have guys who aren't that profitable, guys who are, and it all depends on how you run your business. But you can certainly be very profitable doing crawl spaces. So one of the things that it will solve is if you're offering that service and you have it coming in all the time, you don't have anybody that's going to an emergency, because it's all scheduled work, right? Just like basement waterproofing and everything. So it solves a lot of that. Even if you develop a separate team just for waterproofing, right? So you get that benefit. You don't have an AR because you typically collect 50% when you start, 50% when you're down. Maybe it's a third, depending on your state and all that stuff. But you're not, when you're done with that job, you collect the money right then and there, right? And run their credit card and boom, it's done. So you're de-stressing from that as a business owner, right? Your cash flow is starting to drastically improve. You're not having a stress on your employees. You're not stressing about having to run out to everything immediately for your own marriage, right? So you're improving things that way as well. So, a basement waterproofing job as well. This is a quick thing that usually can get done pretty fast. Most of the training, there are manufacturers that all offer the training how to do this. So the excuse for I don't know how to do it is really not there. And they actually, in some ways, the waterproofing industry is better at training than the disaster restoration. What I mean by that is not from a necessarily technical standpoint, but it's not uncommon for a manufacturer or a distributor to have a crew. Like on my last episode or last two episodes, we discussed with two other distributors. They'll actually send a crew out to the job and train all your people, right? So that doesn't happen with the disaster restoration industry unless you hire a consultant like yourself, right? Yeah. So that type of support is just unbelievable. So everything that they need there, they have a thing they have services that are related to what they do already, water and mold. They have those certain services solve cash flow problems, pricing problems, stress problems. So, why they wouldn't jump on that is beyond me. But it does seem like the industry's starting to do that. Jeremy Reitz, I think is a big part of that at Reitz Drying Academy, doing the training and stuff and introducing more and more people to that. When you met me, we can talk about that in a second, but I had to turn around and figure out a way with the situation I was in from my last employer, right? I couldn't offer disaster restoration business, but I started a disaster restoration business, right? Yep. So I was in real trouble, right? With 3 brand new kids, and I had to figure something out. And I ended up, discovering this path and went down it, and it became the biggest blessing ever. So
for sure.
How did we meet? Can you just talk about that? Do you remember?
I think we were both in jail at the same time. I don't remember. No, I'm kidding. It was.
You said that because of the tattoos, right?
That's of course, stereotype all day long. It's a stereotype. No, I'm kidding. I want to say, well, I mean, listen, your work is legendary, and you won't take that compliment well. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. But I think we started the restoration, excuse me, the Restoration Rebels, and you came across that because what people don't know, Robert, is, and I learned this early, you're not just a Crawlspace guy. You have a complete knowledge of all of the other aspects of disaster recovery, restoration, remediation, AMRT, mold. I mean, you have to, but you understand drying and thermal dynamics and energy and efficient and things like that. So your conversation, but you came into the Restoration Rebels and it's like, who's this guy? But man, you just throw in knowledge bombs and a very giving person. And that's attractive to a lot of people. So you gained a lot of attention, and myself and Andy and others were like, oh, this is a winner. And really, really early, we're like, come into our inner circle because you're like us, you're our tribe. And I'll tell you that, I was managing a company here in the Mid-Atlantic area, and we were doing crawl space encapsulation. And I saw your work, the quality of work you're doing and the time you're putting into it. And I just didn't want to even offer it anymore the way we're doing it. I went back to the drawing board and told my team, said, nah, guys, we're trash. It's like when you've seen something better, you're like, wow. But I think that's where we met as well. That's where we met online And then we eventually met in person, and being about a state and a half away. And that was just the beginning of a lot of alignment, work, and personal friendships. We have a lot of things in common, family and stuff like that.
Yeah, awesome. So, definitely just to recap, this is a services you think that they should absolutely offer and look into. You'd agree with that?
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that because I can hear voices in my head, and don't have me locked up with a code 5150. I hear a lot of restorers immediately, and I've heard this, immediately making a few excuses. And one thing is, you mentioned a crawl space encapsulation, when done right and priced right, could be 15. I've seen them. You have $20,000. A restorer is asking two questions immediately. Those that are used to the insurance world, a customer would never pay that out of pocket. And secondly, will the insurance cover that? That's an automatic default go-to. But if you're going to go into a different service-based business, you've got to change mindset. And you've got to look at, you are a service company for a service that people want and need to improve their homes, crawl space, and affect their living. And people want this. These companies that are doing it aren't doing it for no reason. They're not that great of salespeople. It's something that's needed. Our mind makes us think that insurance won't cover it. And a lot of times that's very true, but that's the whole point. As long as insurance is involved, it's changing. But I can hear restorers already with a few excuses, but I want to tell everyone, erase that. Stop it. Just if you're going to think about this and have bigger conversations with Robert, you're going to have to start thinking differently to get somewhere different that you haven't ever been. And I hope that's fair to say, Robert.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what did I want to say on that? So, shoot, I just lost my train of thought. I hate when that happens. But
Yeah.
what were the two excuses you just said?
The customer would never pay for that.
Oh, let
And
me address that one. So, the customer never pay for that. So they're assuming that because they're always going there for a non-elective service, and they're thinking that the majority of the time that, we'll just use crawl space encapsulation or basement waterproofing, is always an elective service. And most of the time it's not. What actually happens is somebody goes to sell their home, an inspector comes down there, right? Or maybe a pest control company or the HVAC guy, and then they find all this damage, and then the homeowner wants to protect their most valuable asset, right? And or they're trying to sell their home and they need this done ASAP or they're going to lose it. These are now non-elective services. These are emergency services, right? That have a schedule built into them, and they have to get done, right? It's either I'm going to not sell my house, right? Which is not, feasible in most situations. They got to get it fixed so they can go to closing. And the other one is they have a real, problem that is destroying their most valuable asset, and they are going to bend over backwards and figure out how to turn around and spend the money to get it fixed. Right.
Well, I think the contractor could be part of that equation too, and offer some. I mean, you've got to have a frictionless experience for your customer, and you might have third-party financing. You've got to have some options for that, and that's not something that exists or is embraced in our side. I teach that. Have that as an option on your website for your big deductibles, for your out-of-pockets, or even to pay you so they can get reimbursed. But again, I just don't want anyone to use these as excuses. Robert, I want to add something in here, and you can cut this out if you want to. I was shocked when I learned from a very large manufacturer of dehumidifiers, for crawl space dehumidifiers, that their number one purchaser were pest control companies.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I won't say pest control companies don't do a good job with encapsulation. I think that there's probably times when they don't, and they do. But you are already embedded with a baseline education and knowledge about how this building science should make more sense. You're more qualified than a pest control company. So don't give these jobs away to that. You already have a customer. You're working on the envelope of the house, not pest control. And again, I don't want to get laser shot snipered by a big pest control company. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying there's some work there that we're not identifying because we've just kind of ruled it out. But I think we're in a perfect position to do so.
Yeah, here in Charleston, one of the things that when I first moved down here, I found out was really weird was before you sell the house, it has to have a moisture inspection done. I think they call it a C100. I may be wrong on that, but that has to be done, and it's done by the pest control company. So it's not, a water damage company who, has all this structural drying knowledge, nor a waterproofing company, which also has a lot of structural drying knowledge. It's done by the pest control company.
What's
Weird.
that protocol? How are they, are they using concrete moisture meters? Are we talking just atmospheric, or do you know much about the testing?
Yeah, they're basically psychrometer. They're checking the relative humidity, the really just the relative humidity and the moisture level of the wood with a with a petimeter, or
Right.
something of that nature, and that then they call out the person to fix it, right? It's like, oh, now you got to call an encapsulation company and come and fix this, but it's like, well, if that's the person you got to call to come fix it, why don't you just call them in the beginning to look at it? Right now, I guess you could get in a conflict of interest maybe, but then I would think that they would go to an industrial hygienist like my wife at that point, right? And have them be the third party, because that's already established that, you have that independent party before the restoration contractor. But a pest control company just seems so weird.
It seems like and listen, the mold girl is a comet. I mean, she is a laser beam in this thing, and I love what she's doing. And there is a huge place for third party IEPs, but I tend to lean into, I think that if you are really a restoration professional, I think diagnostics should be a very, very important part of your tool belt, your Batman tool belt. And I don't think that every case requires a third party because of this conflict of interest. I don't think we should assume that all contractors are shady and that we need that. But I think when there is signs of a bigger issue and you can't come to obviously you can't come to the bottom of it, you need an IEP. But we're as qualified as a pest control company to do that. And no one on their website probably advertises to be a moisture control identifier. And again, maybe I'm speaking out of terms. Listen, I know a lot of IEPs, and especially one, Liz, that just kills it and it validates everything they do. And I think there's a place for that. But I also find a lot of restoration contractors who just walk away from that stuff because they don't have a good relationship with the IEP, and then they don't do it themselves. They don't refer someone. And I think you're doing a disservice for someone. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah. So, well, I think that's pretty much all that I have, and I super appreciate you coming on the show. Anything else you'd like to say, or how people can find you?
Yeah. So it's not hard to find me if you're looking. We have a Restoration Advisors we're on Facebook and LinkedIn, website, restorationadvisors.com. I have the podcast, Disaster Podcast. I mean, again, probably too many places. Just pick one wherever you go. Get a hold of Robert. But I would tell everyone, if you're in the restoration remediation space and you're asking yourself, where are all of the professionals hanging out? Where are good people that I can learn from and teach to? Where are they? And that's going to be with airrestore.org, AIRESTORE.org. Go sign up. It's there is a cost. There are dues, and there's two reasons. First, we want people who will put their money where their mouth is and know that they're serious and it's not just free. And secondly, it costs money to keep this thing going, the website and stuff like that. So, it's not a nonprofit, but we treat it like it is. All the money goes into support, as well as we do scholarships for technicians and people to go to training. We got a lot of cool things. We do giveaways at REITs for PAPRs and stuff like that. So if you're looking for a good place and get with the right people, I think that really just levels up everybody in this industry. But other than that, just go to restorationadvisors.com, check us out. Let us know if we can answer a question. I'm on 15-minute calls with people all the time. Even if you're not going to be a customer, I want to see you doing it better.
Yep. And don't forget to go to Restoration or Disaster Podcaster, your podcaster, and make sure you guys subscribe to that as well. Well, thanks so much, Clark, and have a super awesome day, bud.
You too, bud. Thank you for having me on.